Welcome to another Mindful Health Discussion at Mind Myself. I'm Esther, founder and CEO, and it is my pleasure to have our wonderful doctors with us today, and we're talking about mindful resilience. Actually, our topic today is balancing body and being. I'm jumping ahead of myself. The December event is Mindful Resilience, but this is about that too. So balancing body and being, holistic approaches to metabolism and weight management. Mind Myself is all about helping you become your own best health advocate. And our goal is to cultivate unity in a time of divisiveness. I'm sure you might have experienced some of that in the last few years in the world. And we want you to feel seen and heard and supported in your health journey. Thank you to my team. Thank you to my two sponsors, BFO Consulting and the Gift Basket Company, which is morphing into Spread the Love. You'll see some stuff from them later. And I want to take a moment to congratulate you for being here and prioritizing your health. If you could do me a favor, raise your hands. Everybody raise your hands. That's it. Raise your hands, everybody, including kids. Rub them together. Get some energy going, and then place them on your heart. Place them on your heart. And this is your gift of self-care to yourself today. So congratulations for that. And before we go any further, I have to do two things, a land acknowledgement and then a disclaimer. So I'm privileged to live, work, and play on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Semiahmoo, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Kakite, and Tsawwassen First Nations, also known as Surrey, BC, and Canada. And all the information and advice from Mind Myself and the practitioners is for general education purposes only, and it is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The information here and on the Mind Myself website should not be used to self-diagnose or self-treat medical conditions. We always recommend that you consult with a doctor or other healthcare professional for individualized medical advice on specific medical issues. The views and values of each practitioner do not necessarily reflect the views and values of Mind Myself, although I suspect we have a lot of overlap. An opening thought or quote for the day. We've been talking about our bodies, our intricate ecosystems, and metabolism is the dance of life within us. And I love Dr. Mark Harmon's quote. He says, while weight loss is important, what's more important is the quality of food you put in your body. Food is information that quickly changes your metabolism and genes. And this is one of my favorites by Kristen Oja. My weight does not determine my worth. So hold on tight. You're going to be in for a jam-packed session of information today. And we have three amazing practitioners, doctors today with us. Dr. Anita Tanner, Dr. Nilima Deshpande, and Dr. Sally Runagi. So I'm going to get them to introduce themselves. And Dr. Nilima, I'd love it if you could start us off and tell us a little bit about who you are and your credentials.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this. I'm Dr. Nilima Deshpande. I'm based in Pune in India. I'm a gynecologist with 3 decades of international experience, having worked in Bhutan, the UK, and in India. And I specialize in menopause and sexual health, although I treat a variety of gynecological conditions, including incontinence and pelvic floor dysfunction. I am also an international Maiparam and Karlakatai coach, which is an ancient Indian martial fitness art, which also specializes in improving metabolism and well-being and cardiovascular fitness. I'm a Wild Fit coach and also a PQ coach.
Wow. What haven't you done? And welcome, Dr. Nilima. Dr. Anita, tell us a little bit about you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Anita Tannis, and I have been practicing medicine for a little bit over 30 years, and I'm a conventionally trained physician, but technically in family practice, but it's been a long time since I had a family practice, maybe 25 years. And I've had sort of a path working with holistic, integrative, and eventually functional medicine, although I wouldn't call myself just a functional medicine doctor because I practice a lot of other modalities as well. My specialty for the last sort of 10, 15 years has been working with perimenopausal, menopausal women, and hormones and stress. But the reality is that I see their husbands, I see their mothers, I see their adolescent daughters. I'd spent quite a bit of time working with adolescents in the past. And so it's kind of expanded. I currently work with a chiropractor, a functional neurology chiropractor who works a lot with brain health. And so I'm seeing a lot more people with sort of head injuries and hormonal imbalances as a result of that. So I am semi-retired. The demand for work with this group of people that got a little bit overwhelming. And so I, like all my patients who I counsel, I'm working on finding better mind-body practice balance.
Thank you, Dr. Anita. That's so wonderful. And we're so grateful that you're here, and Dr. Nilima and Dr. Sally. So, Dr. Sally, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Dr. Sally Ranagi. I'm a naturopathic physician here in Vancouver, BC. I am trained in Arizona. I went to naturopathic medical school there, as well as I have my master's in public health. And my focus majority of times are for premenopause and postmenopausal patients, as well as menstruating females as well. I also focus on a lot of autoimmune conditions, from Lyme disease to Crohn's and to other gut issues as well. One of my favorite things to focus on is dermatological skin conditions, which is eczema, psoriasis, acne, which ties in really well with hormones as well. Trained in different modalities as well, IV therapy, acupuncture, as well as aesthetic medicine, just a little joy on the side as well. So that's about me.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the three of you again. And I love this quote by Lynn Margulis. Life on earth is more like a verb. It repairs, maintains, recreates, and outdoes itself. We're going to learn how metabolism fits with all of your divergent practices and how we can learn from that and make some shifts in our own life. So let's jump right in. Let's start with metabolism. What is it? How does it work? And what is its role in our bodies? And I think, Dr. Anita, would you start us off in that conversation, please?
Sure. So on its simplest, metabolism can be understood as how our body takes the food that we eat and converts it into energy so our bodies can function. And that's it works on so many levels. It can work at the macro level. You can also bring it all the way down to a cellular level. So it's basically the process and all the chemical reactions and all the things that are involved in those, all the the vitamins, the minerals, cofactors, hormones that are involved in converting substances we take in into energy so that everything can function in our body. So it's a really big and a very important thing. I can't remember the rest of your question, but that's fundamentally what it is.
That's great. So, and the other ones were, how does it work and what's its role in our body? So maybe I'll go on to Dr. Nilima and you could continue on the conversation.
At the cellular level, our body depends on all of the processes being streamlined so that there's a minimum waste and a maximum utilization of whatever we're eating and consuming, and not just through our gut, but also through our skin, from the air we breathe. The processes of each different system in our body actually determine how we utilize what we are putting into our bodies and what the output is. So again, our mental efficiency, our physical efficiency, our psychological well-being, our sexual well-being, all depends on this very fine process, which is, it's tuned, it's really, really finely tuned to give us the best output. And sometimes the stuff that we mess about with when we eat or drink or breathe stuff can also mess about with the metabolic processes that happen at a cellular level, and that then affects the organ and then the systems in which those organs are involved.
Wow. Kickstarting off. Dr. Sally, if that's great. Yeah, you could leave your microphone on the whole time. Fabulous. What would your contribution be to this conversation?
I think just to build up of what they both have said, it's just a chemical reaction in the body that changes food into energy, essentially. So our body needs energy to do everything from moving to thinking to growing. So that just kind of bring it all together in that sense, how it works.
Fantastic. And I know you've touched briefly on factors that influence metabolism, but maybe we could start with that. Dr. Nilima, what are some of the factors that powerfully affect our metabolism?
We come right down to the basics. So our breathing, how we breathe affects the metabolic processes of the cells. Our hydration, the circadian rhythms, how we wake up and sleep in response to light, the ability of the light to reflect onto our retina and the processes it triggers, because the hormone responses that get triggered by sunlight, by exposure to light, also trigger all the different metabolic processes. Our ability to sleep, how we sleep, the depth of our sleep, the quality of our sleep affects our metabolic processes. Movement, how we move, how we utilize our muscles, bones, joints, the way we breathe in response to movement, and of course, nutrition, and of course, in emotions, our relationships with the people around us. All of these things will affect our metabolism.
Wow. Dr. Sally.
I would say a muscle mass, really. It takes more energy and calories to build and maintain muscle than fat. So people with more muscle mass often have a faster metabolism that burn more calories in the sense. Age, as we get older, our metabolism tends to slow down a lot, as well as males and females. They also have a difference in metabolism as well. Males tend to have faster metabolism than females, and because they have more muscle mass at times and larger bones, as well as physical activity, as she already touched upon as well.
Fantastic. Dr. Anita, what do you experience in your practice around the factors that you're seeing from your patients?
So I was very busily writing down a nice list of all of those things because that was such a great and thorough list. The one thing that I would add in there would actually be our environment, which can involve the stressors, the external stressors of relationships and things, but it can also be the toxic things that we're exposed to, or the positive things so the quality of what's around us, the quality of the air that we breathe, you talk about the quality of the water, the quality of the food, what kind of chemicals we're exposed to. And in that relationship is also recognizing that just doesn't relate to this moment. It's the buildup of all our environmental exposures over our lifetimes, and also what was going on with our parents, and particularly our mother, when we were in utero. So, there's some things, and to take that even further back, we could say our genetics, but we also recognize now, it used to be believed that, your genes determine everything. And now we are very much aware of the fact of this whole field of epigenetics, where we realize that it's kind of, I always like to say, I'm sure I've said this 100 times or almost every talk I give, is that the genes load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. And so what's happening in your environment determines whether genes get turned on or off. So how your body expresses the blueprint you were born with, and that will in turn determine how everything else that you're doing works in your body. But it's also something we have some control over.
Fantastic information. So we hear about metabolism all the time. And why does it shift so much when we age? And are we locked into that? Dr. Sally, can you start us off a little bit on that? You mentioned the age thing specifically.
Yes. I feel like as we age, our metabolism slows down, and that at which we break down food decreases by almost 10% after each decade that we are in. So think of it, when you're a kid, you can wolf down and eat candy bars, fast food, frozen pizza bagels, which were my kryptonite, without a second thought. So you thought it wouldn't impact your weight at that time. And now you are getting your veggies in and you're struggling still to continue to lose weight. So if we look at it with women, most women enjoy their highest basal metabolic rate, which is the number of calories you burn by just being alive. So in their late teens or in their early 20s. So when we're in college or undergrad, we're running around from one lecture to another, and our metabolism was at its highest it's ever been. And then as even during that time, up until like around 25, you're still building bone. So therefore, there's also that process of burning calories as well. So as the age increases, there's not that growth hormone that there for your metabolism to keep up with. So strength training is always key for my patients. I tell them, as you lose muscle, you're naturally also your calorie burning ability slows down even more. And as you lose muscle and gain fat, fat can develop into muscle and cause weight gain, and this whole metabolic dysfunction occurs as well.
Wow. Dr. Anita, can you carry on from that? And are we locked into that?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people researching right now and working towards trying to say, no, this is not, predestined. I have to say, at the moment, there's this, at the moment we're still locked in, but lots of people are trying to make us not locked into that, but what I really see is that what we do, just as Dr. Sally was saying, what we do can alter that the rate at which we decline, or that trajectory. So, building the muscle mass, how we eat, how we spend our time, all those things that we talked about can make shifts. I mean, I think, as human beings, we want to control our world, right? And I love the mysteries in the world. And so, I see a number of people who are trying very, very hard to control everything that's going on in their lives. And, thank God they're not able to control everything. Things still happen, life happens, unexpected people, environmental disasters, social disasters, which I'm really grateful for. But I think we can make steps to make some changes.
Well, that's good news. And Dr. Nilima, I imagine you have a perspective on this too, given that you're a WildFit coach and you have some pretty powerful data there.
Yes, we do know that once you cross the 25, 26-year age group, we all expect everything to go downhill. And certainly when we study metabolism, we know that our catabolic processes, which means the breakdown processes, they kind of exceed the anabolic processes, which are the building processes. And when we're teenagers and youngsters, our anabolic processes are more. Those of us who've had kids, pregnancies, also know that your body is very capable of upping the anabolic process when you're going through a reproductive phase and you're making a baby inside you. So your anabolic processes are modifiable. One of the things I remember my physiotherapist telling me when I had my spinal surgery was that I was lying on my back and losing a lot of my muscle. I very rapidly lost fitness, flexibility, just lying on my back following spinal surgery. And I remember him at the time, he was nearing 70. He says, Nilima, as you get older, it becomes really difficult to maintain muscle. And at that time, he was swimming an hour, doing more than 40 legs, plus spending an hour in the gym. And he said, you got to work every decade of your life that you move on. You got to double the intensity of the workout you do just to maintain your muscle mass. But one key thing, a really important thing, is what you build by the time you're 25 is so amazing, because your muscles have memory and you can trigger that memory at any stage beyond. And I've noticed that because I was heavily into fitness and martial arts until I did medicine. I went into medical college and, completely undo a lot of your fitness when you're busy studying like that. And when I took up martial arts again a couple of years ago, having recovered from spinal surgery and having got my fitness back with WildFit, having lost all of the belly fat and stuff, and I picked up my exercise martial arts routine and the Karlakatai, the muscles have come back really quickly. So your body has a concept, muscle memory, which when you trigger at the right intensity, at the right time, with the right support of nutrition and movement, you can rebuild a lot of it. So not all of it. And yes, the intensity does matter. It does matter how much to failure you take your muscle workouts. And it does matter what base stuff, what molecules you put in your body that allow your body to rebuild that muscle mass.
Excellent. And what about the gut-brain axis? We've heard about the gut-brain and heart-brain. who can comment on that? Dr. Neelima, I see you nodding, so maybe you could start us off in that.
Yeah, we talk a lot with Eric about the gut-brain axis here, particularly that most of the microbes that you carry around you are in like multiples of your system. In fact, it's reasonable to say that we're the home, or we're the mechanism by which all of these microbes get around. So we're actually the hosts for living a long, healthy life and multiply. The gut microbiome actually dictates your food choices. And we know now more and more that your preferences, your cravings, your food choices you make are determined by the quality and the nature of your gut bacteria. So the heavier your food is with sugar-rich foods, carbohydrates, the more it'll want those, and it'll even dictate to your brain the different kinds of food choices it's going to make. Your gut-brain axis is also determined by your vagal tone, which means also the balance between your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems and how much you're able to regulate stress in your life. There is something called eustress and distress, and your body is actually geared to rise up to brief levels of extreme stress. So we hear a lot about stuff like cold exposure, about saunas and steam work, and doing difficult workouts that actually trigger better gut health. And certainly that's what I found with my martial arts practices. When I began the martial arts practice, my nails improved, my digestion improved, my gut health improved dramatically, and therefore my food choices also changed.
Amazing. Dr. Sally, do you have any thoughts around this?
So how I kind of tell patients about their gut and their brain is I say that you essentially have two brains. One is in your skull, main one, and there's another one also in your gut as well. So there's been times I can recall even myself, I'm eating under stress. I'm stressed about something and I'm unconsciously just eating. That food will never digest, especially if you have any IBS symptoms, irritable bowel syndromes in general, and that's such a big umbrella term for patients that get diarrhea or constipation or alternating back and forth. So one of the biggest things that I always tell my patients, or I help them with either herbs, which are amazing for that, is to eat in a relaxed state of mind. If you're stressed out, it's probably not the best time to eat food because you're never going to digest that food. And if that doesn't help, either taking some digestive enzymes prior, if you're having other gut issues, and of course, taking a deeper look at that as well. But the mind and the gut are so strongly connected that when you go on vacation, for example, I can tell myself if I go abroad, I can eat gluten and dairy, all the best things that I can't eat in the state in North America at all. And you feel fine. You feel completely okay. And of course, that goes with the whole process and the environment as well. But you're in a relaxed state of mind. You're on vacation. So you're digesting that food completely better than you would back at home.
Yeah. Fascinating. Other people have talked about GMOs and different things, but yeah. Maybe that's part of it too. Dr. Anita, how would you weigh in on the heart, brain, mind, brain axis?
There's sort of a third mechanism that the microbiome is also kind of involved with. There is actually a direct system called the enteric nervous system that your gut actually has a nervous system of its own that directly connects up to the brain, and that's partly through the microbiome and through the vagus nerve. But there's this connection. What I always particularly working with people with head injuries and things like that, is recognition that it goes both ways. So the gut affects the brain and the brain affects the gut. And so often you'll see people who will have a head injury, and sometimes it's just like a fender bender, over your, seemingly small, hit to the head, or maybe you just bang your head on something and a little bit more. And that actually directly affects how your gut functions. It affects your gut motility. It can affect it triggers your sympathetic nervous system. And basically, the difference between a sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system is that we think about your sympathetic as being your fight or flight, and your parasympathetic nervous system as being rest and digest. And you can't actually be in both of those systems at one time. So when you are stressed and you're activated and you're irritated, as Sally was saying, when you eat food, you can't really digest it. the same too happens with any kind of a head injury. It sort of shuts everything down. And so one of the biggest things I see is suddenly people, they're like, oh, now I have heartburn and now I have this. And so a lot of the times in actually helping people's gut, I work on their brain, but also to work on their brain, I have to work on their gut. And it's a very overlooked piece of a head injury protocol.
So much great information, and let's dig a little deeper into now. We've touched on weight management, but we haven't really gone there. How is our metabolism and our weight related? Dr. Anita, can you start us off?
So the first and most important thing we have to talk about is that a lot of people still function under the idea that calories in equals calories out, and that weight has anything to do with calories. Calories are really just a measure of energy. They're nothing to do with what actually happens to food in your body and what we do with it. And I know that, I think all of us, my generation for sure was so focused on, low fat, low cal, and one of my favorite stories to recount is, being, I don't know, about 16 or 17, and I'm learning about carbohydrates and how great they are. This was, way back in the 80s, late 80s, early 80s. And they, and I'm telling my dad, you have to just eat plain bagels for breakfast. And my dad is European, so he's got a nice piece of rye bread with some pork, with some fat on it, and tomato and cheese. I'm like, Dad, that's so bad for you. And he never listened to me, which was a really good thing. And I just got fatter and fatter, and I was skating 5 days a week because I was carb loading all the time, right? And so the first thing is, even the information that we're going to give you today, take everything and weigh it out and listen and know things are going to change. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many things in medicine that we follow that are obsolete and wrong. But what we do know is that fat is very good for us. Our brain is 80% fat or cholesterol. Our nervous system needs fat. Our sex hormones need fat. What we're starting to see is that what you want to do is, I'm sort of coming back to the weight thing, is that there's so much to say about this, is that it's not just, it's got nothing to do with calories. It really has to do with the quality and the types of food that you're eating. And we're really, really recognizing the importance of protein, of fat, of nutrients, and that you can actually live without adding in carbohydrates for the most part if you need it to, whereas you cannot actually live without the essential nutrients that we get from our fats and our protein. And that's both for our physical health, for our mental health, for our hormonal health. I'm going to stop there, but I think
yeah, I have a feeling we could just talk for hours on that one point alone, Dr. Anita. Yeah. And I see we've got some questions in the chat too, which is awesome. We'll come to those. Dr. Nilima, can you comment a little bit about metabolism and weight?
Before we talk about metabolism and weight, I want to ask the audiences, what do they understand by weight? What do you think their body is when they're weighing themselves? Are they actually weighing their fat, or are they weighing their bones, or are they weighing their muscles?
Well, that's a great question, and people, please respond in the chat. Respond in the chat.
It's easy to lose weight. You just cut one arm off, you chop your head off, you lose weight.
Probably not the optimal way to do it, but
yeah, what you really want to use, what we're talking about, is belly fat, visceral fat. We're not talking about subcutaneous fat. We're not talking about muscle mass. We're not talking about bones. We need them to be heavy. We need muscles to be strong and heavy and work. We need muscle mass because that's what's going to keep us moving. And why is it important? This weight is important because it determines the quality of the last decade of your life. The efficiency of your muscle mass, the strength of your bones, the ability of your joints, and the functional mobility you retain to your last decade of life determines the quality of that last decade and the quality of your death. As we get older, we're worried about how we're going to die. So yes, we want to lose the right kind of weight, which is the belly fat. You want to release it. You also want to be efficient about releasing that weight so that you don't keep putting too much visceral fat back on, because you go back to poor ways of eating, poor ways of, getting in environmental toxins, all the stuff that Dr. Anita talked about earlier. And when you talk about the efficiency with which your body utilizes the food you eat, the fitter you get, the more efficient you get, which means you need less. There's a myth that, just because you got lots of muscle and you're really exercising a lot, you need lots and lots of food to eat. That's not true. The more streamlined, the more balanced your mind becomes, the more rested your system becomes, the more efficient your muscles become, the more active you are, the more efficient your system becomes at extracting the nutrition. You actually need less. So there's a very important distinction to make. Just because you got fast metabolism doesn't mean you've got to eat a lot.
Interesting. And Dr. Sally, I'm seeing the questions come fast and furious now. So if we don't get to them in this hour, we'll do some of those in the Q&A after. But Dr. Sally, one is specific here to you. You refer to stress eating conditions where that food doesn't really get digested. What happens to the undigested food? And I think that's very related to the question that we're talking about right now, metabolism and weight. So maybe you might want to comment on that.
Sure. Well, a lot of things happen when we don't digest food. As human beings, we're supposed to ingest and also release any of that food that our body doesn't absorb. So having regular bowel movements is so essential. The amount of times I hear patients that say, I ask them, one of the common questions is, how many bowel movements do you have in a day? When patients say, once every few days. And that's very concerning, because we're supposed to have bowel movements 1 to 2 times a day, given there's other reasons that could not be the reason for that patient to be having that. But when some of the most simple things is, if food isn't digested and it gets stored, it can get stored in the adipose fat around the belly for a lot of females, and that can affect their hormones. And a lot of most common things that I'm seeing recently is a lot of females experiencing high amounts of fibroids in their body and cysts. And I know this can go a little off topic, but again, when we're not digesting it, undigested foods get stored in the body, can affect so many of females' reproductive organs as well, such as fibroids. I'm seeing a lot of that as well.
I was talking to another doctor recently, and she's been a doctor for over 50 years, and she was saying, I'm seeing fibroids everywhere. So I look forward to having a conversation specifically about that with her sometime soon. Let's talk about some common myths about metabolism. And I know we refer to that in our little pre-recording session, Dr. Sally and Dr. Anita, but let's jump into some myths. And right before we do, let's everybody take a little quick stretch, move your body. We've been sitting, probably some of you have been sitting already for a little bit of time. Shake out your wrists, move your body, take a sip of water. Oh, I know that helps me, and I need to do it more often during the day. So debunking some common myths. Dr. Anita.
Well, the calories in, the calories out is the big one. So part of it's the quality of it. I also think that there's this idea about calorie restriction, and like the less you eat is better. There's a lot of even I was listening to Dr. Jason Fung, who's sort of one of the big intermittent fasting doctors. He's written a couple of really good books, I think the Diabetes Code and the Obesity Code, and he was talking about intermittent fasting. And what I found quite interesting thinking about it, he was talking about how, a lot of people, when they do intermittent fasting, which is this idea that you have certain eating periods and then you have certain fasting periods during the day, and you basically want to try to have a minimum of 12 hours of fasting, because the fasting is during the period of time when we're not putting food and drink or anything into our mouths, is actually the time when, once the body has finished metabolizing your food, it can actually get to repairing tissues and eventually moving into this thing called autophagy, where when the cells that aren't really functioning as well they should be there, they can actually die off. And autophagy means eating itself. So it doesn't eat the good stuff it gets rid of, helps your body detoxify. So, but what happens with a lot of people is that they not only go into intermittent fasting, but they actually restrict the amount of food that you eat. And you actually need food. I mean, as a society, we tend to eat too much, but you actually need food in order to do all the healing processes and all the clearing processes within your body. So we need proteins for detoxification. We need proteins for metabolism, and we need proteins to keep your neurotransmitters in your brain working. So part of this idea that you can just survive for, long periods of time, in certain controlled environments it can be, but that the average person should just sort of, stop eating or just do water fasting continuously. It's not that it can't work. I just don't find it sustainable, and people then go through these periods and then they get really, really hungry and then they refeed and they eat way more than they should be. And that actually has a more negative impact on your body than it otherwise would. So I have no problem with intermittent fasting, but you don't also want to calorie limit and intermittent fast at the same time. You need to actually eat proper nutritious meals with generally a little bit less carb than what we're used to. I'm gonna pass it on.
Thank you, Dr. Anita, and we'll go to Dr. Sally next. And just before you go, Dr. Sally, there's a book by Dr. Mindy Peltz, I think it's called Fast Like a Girl. I've heard many people talk about that and say it's a really excellent resource. I want to check that out. Dr. Sally, myths from your perspective.
So I completely agree with Dr. Anita. I think a lot of times with females that are coming in with intermittent fasting too, for me, at times I feel like patients that are menstruating, not a huge fan of intermittent fasting for them, because a lot of times they affect their hormones a lot. Stress, your cortisol levels. If your cortisol levels are so high, and they can actually suppress your hormones, specifically progesterone, which is your grounding hormone. And that can affect a lot of your menstrual cycles as well. But going off into other myths that I hear a lot is juice cleansing will help me lose weight. So if you like juicing, that's great, but I don't look at it as if you're having juices, you're going to lose weight. I wish that's how it worked, but it doesn't. I think keeping in mind that juices typically have high in calories as well. So drinking it is good, but moderately as well. And a lot of times there are some health risks that come with juicing as well, such as electrolyte imbalance, potential dehydration of your gut, intestines, and even kidney issues as well, because a lot of those juices have high spinach, like a lot of spinach juices and beets, and they have high oxalates, which is a natural substance that can actually cause kidney issues as well. But a lot of times I hear about juice cleansing patients. Yeah.
Right. And I've heard, and Dr. Neema will come to you right now, and you probably know more about this too, that if you're going to be doing juices or smoothies, it's really important to vary your greens especially, and not do the high sugar ones like beets and carrots, and do those in moderation. Dr. Neema, do you have some comments about that and about some myths?
So, whenever I listen to fasting, intermittent fasting advice, which is given on the back of not sound scientific research, but which is quite filled with myths and the kind of blanket thing for everybody to follow. One of the things, certainly when I had this discussion with Eric, and he talks about relating back to our earlier lifestyles as hunter-gatherers. And at that time, our survival was really important. So if you go back to the idea, your body is designed to survive a lot. And it's designed to learn what keeps it alive and what kills it. Starving is never good. Your body will do whatever it can to stop you killing itself. And that means it'll actually stop you from reproduction, from having healthy cycles. It will stop any kind of extraneous stuff. You will lose hair, your skin will deteriorate. And your main body's functions, which keep you alive, are things like your brain, your heart, your liver function, and your kidney function. Your body will put every single effort it can to retaining the function in those, because as long as those are maintained, when you do start to get food again, you're going to need these to actually assimilate the stuff you eat and then come back to living again. And it's only when all of this stuff is nourished properly that your reproductive functions come back. And it's really important for women to remember that they were never designed to have timed fasting. As a hunter-gatherer, you couldn't say, oh, I'm on a period, I'm not going to run away from the tiger that's approaching me. You're going to get up and run. So you didn't have the luxury of suggesting that, certain times of your life you were or were not going to go hunting. You would go hunting when food was available and you could go and get it. And usually it was the men who went hunting because they were disposable. The women were not disposable because they were responsible for replacing the tribe. Their reproductive function was precious. You needed to maintain it with good food and protein and being kept safe. That's what the men were there for. That's why the men ended up going hunting. Unfortunately, what they also did was when they went hunting, the small fry that they caught, they didn't bring back. They killed it there and they ate it, which is why men ended up getting larger brains because they had more protein in their diet than they brought back for the women who were sitting in the camps rearing the kids. So it's really important to understand this difference, this evolutionary advantage that men had over women. But then women developed the other evolutionary advantage, which is the fat on our bodies. We evolved to retain fat on our bodies because we were supposed to grow another human being. We have that evolutionary advantage. There are many women who come to my clinic, I want to lose this, I want to lose this, I want to lose this fat, You are designed to hold on to fat because it has a function. It has the function of keeping you alive because the next generation of the tribe depended on you to stay alive, to feed it, to look after it, to bring it up safely. And that's also why menopause belly fat doesn't go away quickly, is because it knows that as you age, you're less efficient at hunting, you're less of a priority for the tribe to feed, which is why you need to hold on to that fat to keep alive. Your body will keep you alive at any cost.
I see a comment from ZT. So based on that, I will live a very long time, she says. That's funny. So let's talk about nourishing for our metabolic health. Food, supplements. What are some optimal things that people need to eat, especially as when we have several men here today too, but for us women, what do we need to focus on? And I know, Neelima, you were just talking about some of that, but Dr. Sally, can you start us off?
Dark leafy greens. I know kale is not everyone's favorite vegetable. It really isn't. It's not mine either, but it is a great source of fiber. It has so many nutritious factors on it. I tell everyone that at least some form or another, get your greens in. And with vitamin C rich foods, such as kiwi, grapefruits, oranges, have a big bowl of salad. And I know we keep hearing salad every day, but dark leafy greens help regulate your bowel movements, which going back to what I mentioned before, having regular bowel movements, really important for females as well as males as well, and helps detox the body the best way possible. Your liver is designed to detoxify, and the best way to do that is with foods. Supplements are great as well. But I really focus on if you can get your supplements from your foods, the best form. But supplements that I always tell people to have, the top 3 are magnesium, vitamin D, and your B vitamins. That is the top 3 vitamins that I think everyone should be on.
Thank you, Dr. Sally. Dr. Neelima.
I'm going to go back again to our principles, basic principles. As a human being, we have certain essential needs. We have certain specific needs for certain proteins, for fats, for vitamins and minerals. And we've evolved to digest the food we eat in a certain way that's unique to the human body. The most important thing is to get the widest variety of nutrients into the system first. Your body depends more on getting enough of the right stuff than it does on removing bad stuff. If you do not get enough of the right stuff, including the stuff that you don't normally manufacture, your gut bacteria will manufacture a certain proportion of those amino acids and vitamins, etc. for you, but they will also not manufacture some of them. Those end up as being essential stuff. You have to get them from food. If your body doesn't get the full complement of those amino acids, that fat, those vitamins and minerals, it doesn't matter what you take out, it's not going to be able to handle the challenges of everyday life for you. So it's really important you get the full complement from your food, from your diet.
Mm. And Dr. Nita, just before we go over to you, I know one of the things that my partner Bill and I have been working on is getting our food from as clean a source as we can. We've been dealing directly with farmers, and we're privileged in this area to be able to do that. We live in British Columbia, just outside Vancouver, but we deal directly with farmers who raise their meat in a healthy way. They feed their animals proper food and no corn and no soy, and they slaughter them with as much efficacy as possible. And we're getting our produce from farmers. We've got boxes coming in every 2 weeks, and oh my goodness, the difference that is made. And not only is it good for us, but we can taste the difference. Unbelievable, the food that we are eating because we're making some of those choices. So Dr. Anita, nourishing metabolic health food and supplements.
So I want to just make one comment around it. Getting grass-fed, pasture-raised, food. I mean, food is crazy expensive right now.
It is.
If we make it a necessary condition that people have to eat the most pristine of all foods in order to survive, everybody's going to die because, so I think it's really important to recognize that you do the best that you can. And if you can't always get organic, just try to get local grown, try to get, as fresh as you can, try to eat seasonally, things like that are important. You don't need to eat, pineapples imported from, Mexico and throughout the winter. It's not, it's not necessary. So you can make eating well affordable because, convenience foods. And so I just want to say, I know we all know this. I just want to just make sure, when we're talking about food and nutrition, the quality, it doesn't even have to mean that. It makes a difference. So you don't, avoid the processed foods, avoid, the middle lines in the grocery store, get your fresh produce, get your meat, get your nuts and your oils. And you'll notice that, as I think most people will know this by now, that all that stuff that's processed and packaged in cereals and they're still doing new inventions on frosted flakes. I saw something on the TV, right? And they're great. And, and I'm like, are we still advertising basically processed sugar for breakfast for people? I can't believe, so I just want to make a point that, eating real food. Michael Pollan has this lovely, 3-line verse. It's like, eat real food, mostly plants, not too much. And I often tell people if you can't remember what to do. What I do really emphasize is he says mostly plants. He doesn't say only plants. And one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing, particularly among our young people, is there are people who thrive as vegans, but not most North American Canadians, especially if they are on a limited budget and they don't understand anything about herbs and spices and fats. And so throughout my 33 years of practice, some of my unhealthiest people have been vegetarian and vegan, not because there's a problem with the diet, but because it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of understanding in order to do it properly. And I find people are like, well, I'm just not going to eat anything related to animals. And you can live on Wonder Bread and processed cheese and be vegetarian, and you can live on just Wonder Bread and pasta and rice and be vegan. You are going to get sick very, very quickly. And so I find that I really love the idea of eating real food. I also find there's an explosion of autoimmune diseases going on at this time. And a lot of people, when they have autoimmune conditions, don't actually tolerate gluten or grains very well. Often they don't tolerate dairy. Some people don't tolerate beans. So if you're going to be a vegan with an autoimmune condition, I'm not saying you can't do it, but you've got to do your research really, really well. And so I find that I'm currently doing some studying in functional psychiatry and actually really looking at, there's so many in psychiatry, it's our most limited I mean, it's like here, tell me your symptoms and I'll put you on a medication. Most psychiatrists don't actually do any investigations to look for, well, is there B12 deficiency, or is there anemia, or is this person a celiac, right? And all these things can present. But what the evidence is showing in psychiatry is that every single psychiatric condition, anxiety, OCD, depression, bipolar, psychosis, schizophrenia, all of them do well on a very low carb diet where people eat, meat, fish, poultry, eggs, not tons of cheese. Some people can tolerate dairy, some can't. Lots of vegetables and green leafy vegetables and good fats, and really, really limit their carbohydrates, not their vegetable carbohydrates, but like your grains and even your beans and your pulses. Doesn't mean you can't do it forever, but they've actually found that every single psychiatric illness improves on a diet like that, which I think is phenomenal, right? Because your brain just reflects the health in the rest of your body. Like a lot of us, you can actually see abnormal weight gain as not a problem of weight. It's a symptom of your body not being healthy. It's toxic in some way, it's a dysfunction in some way. And some of the skinniest people I know are extremely unhealthy. So, it's not, but some of the heaviest people I know are also unhealthy, right? So there's so many things to it, but for me, it's this real realization that a lot of the things that we are taught on Canada's Food Guide, and the American Food Guide, which are all just supported by different interest groups, we really have to take responsibility for what we're putting into our mouths and own it. If you're going to eat stuff, I ate too much candy at Halloween. I bought stuff I don't like, and bad chocolate is really hard to stop eating. Dark chocolate, I could have one small piece and I'm done. But those little things, I didn't have enough to give to the kids.
That's so funny.
And I felt so awful the next day because I don't usually eat that way. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what happens, So it's okay to make bad choices sometimes, but recognize when you're making them and own it, and then make the other choices.
That is so valuable. This is so important. And I loved, if you have any resources at your fingertips, Dr. Anita, if you could put them in the chat about, if you're vegan or vegetarian, you said you have to be really mindful and pay attention and do your research. If you could give us a few places to start, that would be useful. I know I have some ideas, but I'd love yours. And as we move on to the next, this is a fast conversation. Let's talk briefly about stress and sleep and metabolism. I know that there have been a couple of comments in the chat as well about that. Dr. Neelima, can you start us off with that?
Stress, and there's eustress and distress.
Yeah.
Eustress, our body is designed to live up to. So, the times that we spend in the gym lifting weights, it challenges our body. The times we undertake a mental exercise to solve a challenging problem, that makes our brain build new connections. The challenge of trying to play a new instrument, figuring out fingerings and breath work. So this kind of stress, which is short and sharp and challenges you to develop a new skill, is a different kind of stress. When we talk about stress that's damaging, is the chronic stress, which is the I'm going to die. I call that, because pretty much all stress, all anxiety, fear, exactly, is a fear of loss of survival. At the root of it is a fear of loss of survival. At some level, your body thinks it's going to die. And that on a chronic basis, whether it's because you're thinking stinking thoughts, or because you're eating a diet that's putting your body under extreme stress, or you're not sleeping properly because you're doing shifts, like I did for years as an obstetrician, or you're a night worker, because like we have in India, every city in India is catering to the American work ethic, which is they're awake any time of the night. There are couples who never meet each other except on the weekend. Surprise, surprise, they can't have a baby. So all of these things which challenge your body's ability to deal with the everyday stress of, am I going to survive till tomorrow? that creates chronic stress, and it's going to affect every single metabolic process you have, every single ability of your body to actually digest the food you eat, to breathe properly, to allow rest, recover. Because what is sleep? Sleep is your body's ability to recover from the day stresses, restore, rejuvenate, rebuild, and reinvigorate the cells to face another day where you might face challenges of hunting, getting food. That's our main challenge, right? For hundreds of millions of years, our challenge has been feeding ourselves, because starvation was the thing that killed human beings. It's still the most important thing, and it's something that most people are giving not enough priority to, and that creates stress in their bodies too. Because when your body's not fed properly with the correct nutrients, it's going to experience the stress of loss of survival, which is the primary stress.
Thank you, Dr. Sally.
I think with getting 7 to 8 hours of solid sleep, it seems like a luxury for a lot of people, and not everyone has that advantage. They have kids, they have work, they work at night. So it's hard for them to sleep, but not getting enough sleep can impair your mental function and increase risk of heart diseases among other ill effects, as well as your metabolism as well. I think one of the two best documented effects of sleep deprivation is based on two hormones, leptin and ghrelin. Ghrelin, I can never say that word. Ghrelin is involved in sending hunger signals, and leptin helps to tell you that if you're full. So a lot of times when people are having sleep deprivation, and increases the overeating in the evening due to the low circulating leptin levels and additional time spent awake. So that impulse eating late at night gives you that gratification, but then you can't fall asleep. And it's just the cycle circulates more and more. And especially with stress, again, that also is very connected with your sleep as well. Sleep deprivation can also lead to muscle loss and fat gain as well. With too little sleep, the body is more likely to produce the stress response, the cortisol that we were talking about earlier. So after a sleep deprivation, higher levels of cortisol later in the day prompts the body to store more fat and more inclined to use the soft tissue in the body, such as the muscle, as energy, which means more sleep-deprived dieters. So it's just a cycle that continues over and over again, and it's all linked together.
Thank you, Dr. Anita.
Well, first of all, everything that's been said is fantastic, and I agree with it. I think I think the one thing that I would say about sleep is that we all have different needs, and I sometimes find people get stressed out because they're not getting 7 or 8 hours, but they feel perfectly fine on 6, but they feel so badly because they read that they were supposed to get 7 or 8 hours, and now they're really worried. So one of the things that I'm really big on is listening to your own body and recognizing. I find in the summer, I don't need very much sleep. You know, it seems like the birds start perching and chirping, and it gets light, and I'm up and I'm awake, and I have good energy, and I can go a lot longer. And then, you know, winter comes, and, you know, in Vancouver, it gets dark earlier, and, you know, by Christmas, it seems like it's dark all day long. I don't know what people do who live in Alaska. I want to sleep. I need more sleep. And I know I'm not the only one. And so I think it's sort of listening to your body and obeying those signals. You know, I don't know how many of us also, you know, when it gets dark and you're tired on a November evening, and then you're like watching TV and thinking, oh, well, maybe I'll just watch the show. And then you get so tired you can't get off the couch. So you watch another show and you don't. So those are signals we should be listening to, that, you know, turn off the TV. It's going to keep you awake longer, and just go to bed and use that. So, if you feel perfectly great on getting 6 hours a day, and you can wake up with an alarm clock and you can get through your day and you're functioning, then that's good. I don't find for everybody that that's sustainable. But I really feel that the actual listening part is important.
A key message for all of this today, listening to our bodies. And we are after our hour, and I'm going to shift gears for a little moment before we jump into our Q&A section, and we've got some fabulous ones in the chat. So maybe while I'm doing this, the practitioners could look there. But I'm going to share my screen and tell you a little bit about what's coming up. So let's do this together. And I'm going to do that. And there we go. So our next mindful health discussion is coming up, as I told you in the beginning of this event, on December 15th. And I don't know about you, but when they sing the songs about this is the most wonderful time of the year, well, for some people it is, and for some people it is not. And even if it is, stress can happen. So I thought it would be a fantastic idea this year, just before the holidays on December 15th, even though you've already done a bunch of events, but when we really get into some of the family or connection events, to talk about mindful resilience and how we can approach this holiday season with perhaps a different view in our minds. So, and this time, if you sign up today, you will receive this. You will be registered for the next event, and you'll add your name into a draw for one of these. We're giving one away. Last time we did 3. This time we're giving 1. Fabulous pillow blankets. This unzips at the top, and we will mail this to you. It's a wonderful, cozy, lovely winter warm blanket for you. So we would love, and those are $60 price. And for today, it's coming to you from the Gift Basket Co. and Spread to Love, and you will be entered into a draw for free. If you've already signed up for it, because some people already have, you will be considered entered in for the draw as well. So, and again, appreciations to our sponsors, the Gift Basket Co. and BFO Consulting. And if you have any need for gifts, I highly recommend you reach out. They don't have a website yet, but reach out to me. They do amazing gifts, not like the usual ones. And when you're signing up, make sure I have your phone number and mailing address so I can mail this to you. Okay, so all that for free. Ways to stay engaged with us. We would love it if you found value from today's session, if you would donate to either Blind Beginnings or the Vase of Transformation. I know Wendy's going to put that into the links. And also the Gift Basket Company will probably be giving away one of these fantastic. Two. We're giving away 2. Bill just came in and put these. So your name's going to enter into the draw, and they are amazing. They keep your liquids either hot or cold for 24 hours. So it's amazing. Stay connected with Mind Myself. We have a survey on our homepage and various other points. We want to know what you want. So that's the best way to tell us. Come visit the website if you haven't already. If you have, come back. There's so much to learn. And you can see recordings of this event and past events. Subscribe to our monthly Mindful Moment. We only send it out once a month. And of course, we remind you of upcoming events. And we have a Mind Myself community that is not censored. So it's not on one of the social media platforms. And you can say what you want. And then, of course, follow us on our regular social media channels. Our, of course, favorite way to stay connected is to come to our website and come to these events. So that's it for today on that, and we will return to our regularly scheduled program. But let's shake it out again. Let's do a little stretch, take a sip of water, move your body. We've talked about metabolism. Let's practice what we preach here. I know that I need to do that more and be intentional. So let's do that. Whatever feels good in your body. As Dr. Anita was saying, it's so important to listen to what our body's telling us. So we have a number of people who've asked questions. And if you have a question you want to ask live, please put your hand up. But to start us off, I think there was one back up here, and I think you've covered it, Dr. Anita. Someone said, what do you mean by carbohydrates? So you're referring to starches, and you covered it. It's whole foods. When you're saying minimize carbohydrates, you're meaning processed carbohydrates, correct?
I'm actually going to clarify. I did actually mean minimize your starches, but particularly, you know, the grains and you know, it depends a bit on what's going on. But yeah, focus on your vegetables and your protein and have a little bit.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Hans, you have your hand up, so let's go to you. Unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
I have lots of questions, but first, I love everything you guys were saying. It just, as I approach my 70s, I'm in denial. I want to die young as late in life as possible. So I love what you guys are saying about how to keep the body nourished. There's a wonderful phrase of a researcher in nutrition that goes, "It's truly amazing what the human body and its immune system can do when provided of all the nutritional building blocks that it needs." And unfortunately, in America, only 1 out of 10 of us is doing that. So my question from an aging perspective is, comment on the micronutrient triage theory of aging that Bruce Ames published in 2006 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And then also David Sinclair's paper that sort of suggested that aging is a loss of epigenetic information. And he also has all of the data that shows that really is something that you can reset and return back to a youthful state. And then finally, Professor Nolan from the Waterford Institute of Technology and the Fulbright Scholar and head and founder of the Nutrition Research Centre Ireland makes the point that we do need to supplement, because our food, unless you're privileged to live near Esther and get all the fantastic food that she's getting, and I know that she is completely nourished, our food is produced for quantity, not quality. And as a result, the biochemistry of our life, as Dr. Anita said, is DNA, RNA, protein, the central dogma. That biochemistry of our life is not getting the sufficient cofactors it needs from our mass-produced food. So just sorry to dump all of that on you, but some comments on that would be awesome.
Who would like to respond? Dr. Anita, I see you laughing the loudest. How about you go?
Well, I was writing notes, but while you were speaking, so that I could remember what you were saying, and now I can't read my writing. This is a common issue I have. So I'm not familiar with the micronutrient triage thing. I mean, I might be in concept. I don't know it by that name. So, can you say? I
will put the link to his paper, and this was when he actually 2006 was when he published the theory, and then later there's another paper where he actually proves it in a model organism. But I will do that. So that's here. So basically, what it says that aging is a result of a long-term micronutrient marginal deficiency that has forced the body all of its life to triage. And when it's triage, when it prioritizes the biochemistry that's responsible, as Dr. Nalima said, to keep lights on right now. It don't care about tomorrow. It cares about today. So it doesn't matter whether when you're age 70 or 80, you crack a hip and fall, because that's usually what you do, because you have been marginally deficient in calcium for all of your life, and the calcium is directed to essential functions like keeping the heart working rather than storing it in the bone. So
thank you, Hans. Let's let Dr. Anita and then Dr. Nilima comment. Thank you.
So what I would say, I'm not familiar with it, but I completely, that's kind of my experience. So I would sort of say more from a clinical perspective. And when you look at how people age, I really liked what Nalima was saying, is that basically everything you do determines the last decade of your life. I thought that was a really brilliant way of putting it. Definitely what I start noticing is that there's so much of what your genetics and your epigenetics sort of bring into it, but the really big part of it is what we decide to do. So people who were younger and healthier and active tend to do better as long as they keep it up. That said, in my practice, I've had women in their late 30s and 40s who were what we would think of as super healthy because they were triathletes, and they were women who had 13%, 14% body fat for 10 years through their 20s. And they were racing at the top level, but they didn't have periods, they didn't have anything. And so now I'm seeing them in their late 30s and early 40s, and they've got osteoporosis, they've got osteoporotic fractures, they're having a hard time conceiving. And so part of what we really need to look at in our culture, this Western culture, is this idealization of this sort of like, before it was just being skinny, and now it's being skinny muscular. But as Dr. Nilima was saying, we, you know, as women, we need fat. We don't need to be fat, but we need fat in our bodies. We need it to nourish who we are, and it's part of what we've developed. So this whole recognition of what that actually means. And I definitely find people who have had a lifetime of consistently taking care of themselves, astonishingly, a lot of German and European people that I know in Canada who have maintained, you know, they don't believe everything science says. They don't necessarily follow every fad. They stick to what they learned. They're very particular about their food. I see lots of people sort of from sort of backgrounds that aren't strictly Canadian, North American, actually living really long lives because they don't sort of buy into the commercialization of what we're doing, and they've maintained it lifelong. But I've also attended, you know, functional medicine conferences where the practitioners are now, you know, 60 and 70 years old, and they are far healthier than they were 10 and 20 years back. So it is never too late to change towards the positive. Everything you do, we now know there's neuroplasticity, but we also know there's that whole biological plasticity. Whatever you do now will make a difference, you know, as long as you maintain it, you commit to it, and makes you feel good. So just because you didn't do it right before, it's not too late.
I love that. It's not too late. And Dr. Nilima, I'd love to hear your comments. And just before you do, Dr. Anita, I know when I talked about dealing with farmers and the price of food, sometimes by dealing directly with farmers, we're getting the very best food and we're not paying any more. In fact, sometimes we're paying less than we will. So it is worth exploring this. Sometimes you have to pay up front, but it is absolutely worth exploring. If anyone has questions and you live in BC, I have some great contacts for you. So, but Dr. Nilima, let's get back to this conversation here, please.
I love those references that Hans referred to. I don't know all of those studies, but certainly understanding this, what we've lost in these last, I'd say, a few thousand years is the sheer variety, not only in the kind of quality of foods, including, like, you know, Dr. Sally was talking about the green leafy vegetables, considering that our ancestors probably ate more than 200 or 300 different varieties of fruits and vegetables, and fresh greens. Especially, I know here in Pune during the monsoon season, you can go foraging on the hills and get, you know, leafy greens that are not available anywhere else in India. The same thing happens in South India. But today, you know, you go to the grocery store and you have a handful of, you know, a small selection. You're probably luckier in Canada, and certainly I know in the UK and the US, where if you go to the shops, there's a greater variety of vegetables. But here, when I go to shop in the summer, I have a very small selection of vegetables. How much can you eat? You know, even if you stuff yourself with those vegetables, it's never going to give you the wide range, the variety of stuff that, you know, even our ancestors, my grandparents had. My grandmother never had a vitamin B12 deficiency, but now, you know, including myself, my parents, everybody I know has a vitamin D and a vitamin B12 deficiency. The soil quality has deteriorated progressively over the last few hundred years because of overcultivation, addition of, you know, artificial fertilizers, the loss of regenerative farming, overproduction of certain kinds of animals just for food, so they're not actually left to graze outside, the farmed animals for slaughter. So there's many other factors that are contributing to aging. And yes, it is because of loss of micronutrients, also because of loss of the variety of our gut microbiome. Those of us who live in urban environments have a very restricted, very narrowed down gut microbiome compared to those who live in rural areas. Certainly in India, there have been various studies done from populations in the rural areas who have a much amazing variety in their gut microbiome compared to those of us who live in urban climes. And a lot of it can be attributed not just to our food sources, but also to water. And when I tell some of my clients, please don't drink tap water anymore, they say, why not? Tap water is really good. We get, in Sweden and Norway, everybody says drink tap water. And I say, well, have you noticed that in urban areas, 60% of your water is recycled sewage water? And say, oh, really? So what? So, well, did you know that your drinking water, it has to have certain permissible amounts is allowed? And that includes permissible amounts of drugs, hormones, blah, 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 pesticides, plastics, petrochemicals, everything that water contains and dissolves. And then the eyes open and say, oh my God, that's what it is. So you might be drinking tap water and thinking it's fine because it tastes okay, but there are small quantities of this stuff that's getting into your system that is upsetting your hormone balance. That's the main thing. Dr. Sally was talking about hormone balance. And a lot of these chemicals are endocrine disrupting chemicals, and they bind to receptors in the system. And one of the reasons you're seeing an excess of fibroids, of polycystic ovaries, of endometriosis in urban environments, including countries like India, China, Southeast Asia, is because of this contamination of our water and food sources with endocrine disrupting chemicals. And a lot of these bind to estrogen receptors and trigger overproduction of these particular hormone-dependent tumors and problems.
Wow. Now, if that's not stress-inducing, I don't know what is. But I find a way. There are ways to get filtered water. I know we have a filter in our house too, and that's so important. And there are ways to get it that you don't have to spend a lot of money as well. Dr. Sally, before we go over to you, and I know our time is running out, so this is great. We've had a few questions in the chat about stress eating. How do we navigate stress eating? I think we've all done it at a time or two. Dr. Anita, you talked about Halloween and eating bad chocolate. And Dr. Sally, can you talk about stress eating from your perspective, and what can we do about this? How do we deal with this?
So whenever I ask patients, like, what is your stress level in 1 to 10? They all look at me and start laughing. But it's a question to ask. Everyone responds to stress differently. Some people hold it in. Some people, you can tell when they walk in frantically, there's stress, traffic, everything in life is very stressful. It could be from financial to family to your health. So I always tell them that when you wake up in the morning, your cortisol levels are its highest point. And as the day goes on, your cortisol should slowly go down. But that's not the case for every individual. There is spikes throughout the day. I ask them, what is the most stressful time in the day for you? So I feel like there's a lot of self-reflecting. You have to see what your triggers are. As practitioners, there's things that we can help with, we can guide them. But I think as patients, we really have to know exactly what your triggers are. If, for example, patients come in, they're like, right after I get back from my lunch break, that's the most stressful time I have. So trying to figure out why that is and finding the root cause of it is what naturopathic medicine really is, trying to find the reason why this is happening. And again, going back to management of it, herbs are my favorite things for managing stress. I think herbs like ashwagandha is amazing, rhodiola, eleutherococcus, so many herbs that help decrease that heightened cortisol levels throughout the day.
And how do you get those herbs? How do people take those?
They can either do it through a supplement route or through tinctures. I know at our clinic, we compound different herbs for patients and for different reasons as well. And that's one of the main ways that I like as well, along with nutrition is key, exercise and mindfulness is really key as well.
Thank you, Dr. Sally. Dr. Nilima, stress eating.
The meaning we give the stress we're having. So we programmed our beliefs about things get programmed when we're very young. And we develop certain strategies and beliefs for dealing with the stuff that we consider as stressful. And what stress is, again, at its root level, is a fear of loss of survival. Any kind of fear, anxiety, depression that comes around boils down to fear of loss of survival. That's what creates chronic long-term stress. Learning to manage stress comes down to not just what you eat, but also the quality poor quality food is stressful. People think that. I had a really interesting story. I was staying with a friend of mine in Birmingham, and her kids were having exams. And I was looking at them, and she says, "No, I'm going to eat all the junk I want. Once my exams are finished, I'm going to eat properly." I said, "Shouldn't it be the other way around? Hang on a minute. You're studying for exams. This is like, do or die. It's going to make your career. Shouldn't you be putting the most amazing kind of food so your brain can do the best it can for your exams and not leave that to chance?" And then she's like, "Oh yeah, maybe." So yeah, if you eat junk, that's incredibly stressful for your system. That's not good. But the problem with eating junk is it's addictive because it contains chemicals that go and trigger the happy chemicals in your brain, make you do that behavior again and again. And sugar does that. All the added chemicals do that. The processed foods, that's going to upset your microbiome, and your gut microbiome gets hooked on that as well. So it's going to make you eat more and more of that. You do need a little bit of willpower to move away from that, but what really works is replenishing nutrients. So when your body is well nourished, is when it's actually able to make better decisions for you. That's why, I put in the chat earlier, you can't exercise your way out of a bad diet. You certainly can't meditate yourself out of a bad diet. I've tried it, it doesn't work.
That's funny.
And your brain is stable. And like Dr. Anita says, you lower your carb levels, so your brain is actually running on really, really good quality fats and proteins. And when your thinking becomes clear and pause, Viktor Frankl, the Frankl moment where you can pause before you react, your Frankl moment becomes tangible. You can actually make a decision in that moment. Or, hang on a minute, this stuff is not good for me. I'm not going to touch it. Otherwise, it becomes really hard, because then in survival, what are you going to do? You're going to eat whatever comes in front of you. And for years, I used to be the kind of person, I'd gobble because I'd eat and eat and eat. Your brain and body is incredibly smart. It can look at food and know it only contains this much nutrition. You're going to need 3 times this amount for what I want. It's already going to make you overeat.
Wow.
So, he's incredibly smart. Really good nutrient-dense food, and you don't need a lot of it. Just a little bit is incredibly satiating. That's why cheetahs only hunt once in 10 days, because the elephant's eating all the time.
Wow. Dr. Anita.
Just to hang on. So one of the, I have so many thoughts, but one of the things that really comes to me is, first of all, I mean, I'm sure there are people who don't occasionally eat out. Some people stop eating when they're stressed, but I think the majority of women that I know, we've at least done it at least once, and some of us many times, right? So one of the first things is just stop hammering on yourself. Just, if you've done it, you've done it. If you're doing it, okay, accept it. Okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to binge eat, and I bring it to your consciousness and go, yes, I'm eating everything that I can see in front of me, and I am choosing it, right? Because if you just go into that, I'm just not really here, and it's just coming in, and I don't know what's happening, you're doing yourself so many disfavors. So maybe if you actually start noticing it, you might stop, but you may not. But so that's the first thing when you're in the middle of it. Little simple techniques that I find are helpful is, a lot of times when we are, I love the idea of like being in survival mode. A lot of times when we binge, we're actually needing energy, or we have this perceiving that we need to muster up for energy. If you can not have a box of cookies sitting on the table, don't have the sweet stuff that's visible, but always have access to some good quality protein, I can guarantee you that you will feel a lot better if you binge on, turkey, or if you binge on, cans of, I know they've got mercury in them, but you're still going to be a lot better off to eat 3 cans of tuna than you are going to be to eat, 3 bags of chips, right? So you're only going to be able to eat so much. You'll get full, you'll get satisfied. The messages are going to be really good. And so choosing higher protein, don't eat cheese. It's hard to stop eating cheese. If you're binging on cheese, you're going to eat a lot of cheese. I mean, if you do, it's still going to be better than the bag of chips, but don't eat the cheese and then the bag of chips. Try to keep it to sort of certain things. But then the last thing, I love one of my favorite books that I recommend for all my patients. It's called The Untethered Soul, and it's by Michael Singer. And it's it's just basically recognizing that we all have these voices in our head that are constantly talking to us, and they sort of rule our lives, and how do we come back to sort of being at peace with ourselves and within our soul. And I like it because he's non-denominational. It's one of the most spiritual books I know, but he doesn't invoke any particular religion or God. But in it, he talks about quitting cigarettes. And he says, you can get patches and you can get pills and you can do meditation and you can do devices. But basically, there's only one way to stop smoking. And that is to stop putting the cigarette in your mouth. And I don't know about anyone else, but when I first read that, I just started laughing because as women with issues with eating, I don't know, I can't stop eating it. I can't stop eating it. Sometimes you have to just say, stop, like just stop, and I know it sounds really harsh. I'm not saying it's always effective, but at a certain level, we have all these excuses, and they're good excuses about why we run in patterns and why we do things. But sometimes we just need to be accountable and saying, I am a human being. I can't control anything in the world. I can't control my kids. I can't control my partner. I can't control my job. I can actually try to control this one thing, which is putting what I'm going to put in my mouth, and I'm just going to stop. It takes a mindset. It takes a shift. It doesn't always work, but what I do know is that when you practice it more and more, and it's kindly, it's not like, stop, you crazy lady, stop, what's the matter with you? It's just, you don't really want this. Just stop. And I find that a lot of times, even if I'm in the middle of something I don't wish I wasn't doing and I stop it, it is such a powerful thing. It's almost more powerful to be able to stop than it is to not do it in the first place, because now you go, wait a minute, look what I did. I took control, and I didn't need a pill. I didn't need another drink. I didn't need a walk. I didn't need a pill. I just stopped. So just to remember, that is within us, and sometimes you have to dig hard for it. Sometimes we're not very good at finding it, but it is inside of us. And sometimes it has to be that black and white in order to change the pattern.
I love that. I love that. It's listen to your body. It's so powerful and smart. And then sometimes and pay attention to what it's saying to you after you do something. And then sometimes it's just stop. And it's always love yourself.
Love yourself
love
anyway.
Yourself, no matter what. Love yourself. If we're coming from that place, it just changes everything. And returning to it, like you said, when you're in the middle of a bad pattern, or as Rusty said earlier in the chat, the itty bitty shitty committee that's just pounding on you. No, release that. Love yourself. And I'm reading another comment in the chat. For the record, because of our direct connection to farmers and their markets, we save about 20% of our overall food budget compared to grocery store shopping. So that was a surprise to us, and I want to encourage people. I know we're at the 90-minute mark here, and I think there are a few more questions. But for those of you who might have to leave, I want to encourage you to reach out to our practitioners. I know that Dr. Sally and Dr. Deshpande, Dr. Nilima, are both taking clients and patients and consults. Dr. Anita, not so much, but all three of these amazing practitioners would welcome opportunities to have paid speaking gigs. If you're in connection with people around the world, these are amazing women. And if you know any gigs where they could speak, I know Dr. Nilima just got back from a speaking gig in Turkey, and I still haven't heard about that so much yet. And I know Dr. Anita would be fantastic on any panel. And Dr. Sally, I know you're just sort of getting going in your career in the first 3 years, but you wouldn't turn down a speaking gig either, I have a feeling. So reach out to these people. We've put the contacts in the chat. This is fantastic. And if you have to go, feel free to do so. But we have a few more questions that I think are really burning here. And one of them has to do with belly fat. Okay, so I know you talked, Dr. Nilima, about we need some, especially as we're aging and our bodies need it. But what do we do if there's just a little bit more than we might want, and we're doing a lot of the things properly, but we still can't? Any tips on belly fat?
I just had a discussion about this in our closing WildFit call, and somebody was saying, oh, the menopause belly fat. And one of the first things is the more you stress about it, the more it's going to hang on. So what you resist persists.
Right.
So getting back to basics, I think once you fixed your nutrition, like especially with WildFit, all of the people who do WildFit, they get their nutrition on track. You know, they're more very, very low carbs. So they've removed the grains and they've removed the stuff that comes with dairy, and then they're worrying about what happens next. So my guidance is always to go back to basics. It's going back to restoring your breathing, going back to hydration, going back to optimizing sleep, and particularly getting back into the circadian rhythm. And there's a wonderful book by Dr. Sachin Panda. You can look up his TED Talk as well, which talks about people who actually released a ton of visceral fat just by optimizing their circadian rhythm and sleep routines. And that
Oh, you disappeared, Dr. Nilima. We can't hear you now. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. Can you try again? Nope, still can't hear you.
now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so they did a study in China where they compared two similar populations, exactly the same calories, the same food. They allowed one lot of people to eat dinner, and the other group was asked to eat the same food at breakfast and lunch and not have dinner. And they found that the metabolic differences between the two of them was so remarkable that eating late is one of the worst things you can do for belly fat. So if you're going through menopause, which is one of the key times when we start to accumulate fat on our bellies, because that's the fat that takes over some of the role of manufacturing some of the estrogens that we need, just changing the time that you eat last will make a big difference to how much fat you retain on your tummy. It also affects the quality of sleep you have, and particularly at menopause when sleep disturbances are very common. Over 60% of women going through menopause will experience sleep disturbances. And that, like Dr. Sally explained, has a huge impact on the following day, on the kind of food you choose, how you eat it, how mindfully you eat it, and how much of it you eat. So your food choices and your decision making is affected by the quality of sleep. So it's all tied in with each other. Every single time you're worried about belly fat, visceral fat, the key is to go back to basics, always the basics. Your breathing, your hydration, looking at sleep, circadian rhythm, your movement, optimizing your exercise so that's not stressful. I see so many women who are hitting the gym. They think they're hitting the gym every day, exercise every day for 90 minutes. They're doing themselves a disservice because over-exercising also causes an increase in cortisol levels and can make you hold on to fat because you're telling your body you're going to die. That's the interpretation of chronic stress. You're going to die. If you're going to die, your body's not going to release fat because that's what it means. It's going to keep for your survival. So it's really important. So this is what I tell women who come to me wanting to lose belly fat. And you can't target, can't do more crunches to lose belly fat.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Sally?
I think going a little bit on the exercise portion of it and cortisol, I always tell my patients that are menstruating, there is a time and place for different types of works out. So during their times where they're going through their menstrual cycle, doing very soft exercising, just going for walks, getting some movement in. And then as they're going through different phases of their menstrual cycle, they will incorporate more HIIT workouts, a little bit more heavier intensity. And then as they're going through another phase, more calming exercising. So again, going back to cortisol does prompt the body to store more fat. If you're always at this heightened level of cortisol, it will store more fat. And then it's a disaster in that sense with stress. Yes, I would agree with everything Dr. Nilima said.
Thank you. And Dr. Anita, and just before we do who was the doctor in study optimizing circadian rhythm? I think it was Dr. Sachin Panda. That's from you, Dr. Nilima. Great. Fantastic. Fantastic. And where to leave the testimonial, please just put it in the chat. That would be amazing. And Dr. Nilima, what are your thoughts on this whole belly fat conversation?
Oh, Dr. Me. all the above. I was just going to add a couple of things. I do find it was just touched on really briefly by Dr. Sally. I put almost every patient of mine, and I add other things on vitamin D, magnesium, B complex, and lately zinc, just because I test zinc levels and most people are deplete, and both zinc and magnesium are involved in so many reactions throughout the body that you really need them, as are your B vitamins. And I find that sometimes what happens is my patients are they're just, they're eating the foods, but they're not either absorbing it, they're not getting the right amounts. Stress really burns up your B vitamins and it really burns up your zinc. I don't know anybody who is not stressed. I think it's very difficult to be alive in our world today with even if you're not personally involved in anything political, the background buzz of everything that's happening in the world is impacting everybody. Plus, the decreasing quality of our food and threats to our food sources and food security and everything. So even if you're not paying attention, it's there. Plus, the financial issues that are coming out of it and all the personal and social. So I really feel that you can get those extra nutrients from your food, but it's really, really hard, especially if your digestive system isn't working. So I would add those things in. I'm a really big believer in not over exercising. For years and years, I've seen people, they're on the Stairmaster at the gym and they're burning 1,000 calories on the thing and they're just gaining a pound every week, even though they're there 5 days a week. This whole idea that the way we were designed as sort of animals or early human beings is that cortisol was supposed to come up in the morning and in short stints when there was stress. The tiger was chasing you, you were chasing the tiger, either you died or you ran away from the tiger, and then cortisol would come down. Chronic stress historically meant it meant famine, right? It was a long, cold winter. And so our bodies are designed to respond to chronic stress by slowing everything down. Your thyroid actually slows down. If any of you have ever done thyroid tests, I every once in a while I see people and they've been doing diets and stuff like that. Their thyroid function actually, it does decrease, right? So your thyroid slows down. You're meant to put on fat in order to survive because you're trying to avoid the starvation, So letting the body know that it's safe, going for a 2-hour workout after a really busy, stressful day at work, as you guys mentioned, is stressful, staying at home, doing some yoga stretches, doing some meditation, going for a nice walk with somebody that you really love, interspersing it into, I like high intensity interval training for people. Depends a little bit on your body type, depends on your metabolic type, on your situation. But, some of the studies show that you can actually have far more benefit from doing very short times where you actually only raise your heart rate for about 4 minutes out of 20 minutes, and you can actually change your body composition that way. So it's that whole idea of working smarter, not working harder. I keep sort of saying that my goal is to be able to accomplish more by doing a lot less, and not that the accomplishments give me more worth, but it's how do I reach more people? How do I do more of what I think is really of benefit in the world and to myself, but not be trying so hard all the time. I feel like we're trying too hard to lose weight. There's something even in that mindset. Nobody's like, oh, I'm losing weight. Everybody's trying to lose weight. Like maybe we have to just stop trying, It's like, oh yeah, I'm losing weight. I don't know.
Try softer, as Lily Tomlin says, try softer rather than trying harder. What would happen if we tried softer?
Or as Yoda says, there is no try, only do.
Or not do, exactly.
Yeah.
Fabulous conversation today. As we wrap up, and thank you so much for giving us a few extra moments of your time here, doctors and everybody on here. And I want to acknowledge Scheherazade. She was a doctor in Iran who has now come to Canada. She's in Ottawa, and she's working on building some fabulous nutrition products that would be good for us. So thanks for being here, Scheherazade. And Denise was on this call. She's going to be one of the practitioners on our next call on December 15th. Practitioners, doctors, are there any final words you'd like to leave people with? Dr. Sally.
I would just say manage your stress and focus on whole foods and strength training. That would be the best thing I would say.
Thank you. Dr. Anita.
As the above, get some sleep, develop a sense of humor. I think that's one of our best allies at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Nilima.
When in doubt, get back to basics and have an oxytocin boost if you're menopausal.
Love it. Love yourself. And I have 2 quotes here, and they're so awesome. Bethany Frankel says, your diet is a bank account. Good food choices are good investments. And Susie Orbach says, I wish we could treat our bodies as the place we live from, rather than regard it as a place to be worked on, as though it were a disagreeable old kitchen in need of renovation and update. So there's your lab for today. Love yourself. Thank you for being here. And reach out to the practitioners and come and visit mine myself. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Esther.
Thank you. And thank you, the practitioners. It's been so wonderful having you here with us.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
We're so glad you're with us, and we're doing this because you matter.